Welcome, ChronoLogic community. This is Community Manager Sean Morgan, and I'm here with developer Joseph, and he is going to explain everything there is to know about this new feature in the settings called TimeNode Economic Strategy. So welcome, Joseph.
Thanks, Sean. So guys, let's get into the gist of it. So basically, what we have is a couple of development updates first. So the first one being this economic strategy. So this economic strategy is a new feature added to the TimeNode core code base, which replaces the old EAC.js client that we had before. We use this client as kind of like a base for all the TimeNode functionality that we've been building. So this is both for the Chronos app and for the command line client that we have for running these TimeNodes. So this new feature called economic strategy is something that we feel will really help TimeNodes kind of customize their experience of executing and running these transactions. So maybe let's have a short refresher on why would you be a TimeNode? Why would you run a TimeNode? So for the people who are here for the first time and who might not be introduced to this topic, maybe Sean, you can kind of cover it in short.
Sure. Yeah, just to give you a big picture here, we are undergoing a security audit right now by Baki Puba, who we've worked with before. And once he's done with the smart contract audits, make sure everything's really secure, within weeks we'll be going to the main net and integrating with MyCrypto. So you'll be able to, or anyone will be able to schedule a transaction, transfer an ERC20 token, using that technology on MyCrypto and also on our browser, DApp, on app.chronologic.network. And so when an end user does that, contributing to an ICO or some other use case, there's a third party, multiple third parties called TimeNodes, and they're running a client and they're competing to execute that transaction within the specified time window. And they earn ETH bounties. I think that's the main reason why people are interested in being a TimeNode, is to earn ETH. But you can also be a helper in the community. You can participate in the ChronoLogic ecosystem. You can understand the supply and demand of this marketplace at a first-hand level, gain experience with decentralized applications, report any errors to the open source community on GitHub, and make use of those day token holdings. If we go to the next slide, you'll see that that's one of the things that you'll need to run a TimeNode is at least 333 day tokens or a time mint. All you need is a laptop or a smartphone, running a browser-based client, MetaMask extension, or you can use one of these desktop clients for Mac, Linux, or Windows, which does have some security benefits doing it that way. Let's go to the next slide, and Joseph will get right into the stuff on the economic strategy.
Thanks, Sean, for the brief refresher of the TimeNode. So let's get into the economic strategy. So basically, what is the economic strategy? So the idea behind it is to allow TimeNodes to have customized claiming conditions. That way, TimeNodes can kind of choose which transactions they would claim and which transactions they would ignore. And why did we even start with building such functionality? So basically, the main idea is to maximize profit from the TimeNodes, of course. Another thing that this will help in a very big way is minimizing risk. So basically, it would prevent, let's say, unexpected transaction costs when TimeNodes are claiming. So as you know, any action that happens on the Ethereum blockchain is basically a transaction, and it costs gas to perform. So the same thing is with claiming transactions, and claiming these transactions really helps us kind of improve some of the collisions when executing these transactions. But adding this economic strategy also helps us remove some of the collisions we might have when claiming these transactions as well. As you know, as you know, all of the functionality that we have here is in regards to the Ethereum Alarm Clock, and it will be implemented as well in the Chronos protocol. But in the Chronos protocol, we are kind of trying to avoid the problems that are already existent in the Ethereum Alarm Clock. So basically, just taking all the lessons we've learned from the Ethereum Alarm Clock and implementing them from the start, from the get-go. So one of these problems are these collisions, because if a time node, if two time nodes try to claim the same transaction in the same block, only one of them can succeed. Another one of them will fail, and they will basically lose this gas that they invested into sending this claim. So by adding this economic strategy, we allow for certain customizations of these claims, and then that also kind of works in favor of these time nodes, where we lower the number of time nodes that try to claim the same transaction in the same block. So okay, so let's get into all of these parameters that you can adjust in this economic strategy. So the first parameter here is the maximum deposit. So here on the right hand side, you can see a screenshot from the latest release so far, the app. So if you go to app.chronologic.network, you can see exactly this view. So if you go to TimeNode and then to settings, you can now see a bit of customization when it comes to the time nodes. And here we have 3 fields, and in this section we'll go through each of those and see how they affect time nodes performance. So the first one is we call it maximum deposit. So basically, what is it? So you can set here, you can set an amount of ether that this will be the maximum amount of deposit that you would like to send in order to claim a certain transactions. So as a short reminder for the deposit, let's just talk a bit about the deposit. So when a person schedules a transaction, they can request a certain deposit to be made by the time nodes, just so they can ensure that their transaction will be executed at the time of execution. So basically it goes like this. So a person schedules a transaction, the time node kind of gives this deposit to the smart contract. So it sends, let's say, if the transaction requires 1 ether of deposit, the time node sends this 1 ether into the smart contract, and when claiming the transaction, and this 1 ether is stored within the smart contract until the execution time. Once the execution time comes, the time node that claimed the transaction is supposed to execute it as well. So if it does indeed execute it, if it doesn't go offline or something like that, if it does execute it, it will regain its deposit back. And this is kind of like some insurance for the scheduler that his transaction will indeed be executed. But in case the time node indeed goes offline and does not execute the transaction it needed to execute, this transaction becomes kind of like free for all. So any other time node can execute this transaction, and the time node that does manage to execute this transaction as soon as possible, it is awarded with a part of this deposit that has been made by this other time node. So basically, the deposit is kind of like some insurance, for the people scheduling, and it forces the time node to kind of execute this transaction. So if you're a time node, you might want to put a certain limit to the amount of deposit that you would like to send for these transactions. For example, if you have let's say 1 ETH, but you would never really want to deposit this whole amount of 1 ether, but let's say you would only be willing to risk let's say 0.1 ether, because you might have, I don't know, maybe you're in an area that has an unstable connection, and you might not be sure that your machine will be up at the time of execution, and you might think that you might miss this execution window. Then then you can limit this maximum deposit. So I think this is like this should be really standard, and like nobody should really deposit their whole balance as for any transaction. So we do advise that once we get to the mainnet, we can still test it out here on the testnet. It's not a big of a deal, but once we get to the mainnet, I would surely advise people to set a limit for a deposit. And but of course, uh, some transactions might have a bigger bounty. Most also might require a bigger deposit. So if you want to, let's say, risk a part of your ETH, you can also set the deposit to unlimited. And then in this way, you just have to make sure that your time node doesn't go offline once the execution time comes. So you just have to make sure that the time node is always up and running. So hopefully that explains this first option. If not, post some questions in the question box, and we'll answer them at the end of the call. So let's get to the second option. So the second option is, we call it minimum profitability. So this allows the time nodes to only claim transactions that bring a profit higher than a specific amount. So you can say, okay, I do not want to claim some transactions that bring very little benefit, very little profitability. So you might want to set kind of like a lower limit in this aspect. Sorry. So basically, minimum profitability in this case, in order for a transaction to be profitable, this minimum profitability set here in this field has to be higher than the profit. And how do we calculate the profit? So basically, we calculate it as the bounty of the transaction multiplied by the payment modifier. So if you guys are not kind of like if you guys don't know what the payment modifier is, I'll post a link here to all of you guys in the chat box, and you can read more about the payment modifier and why is it even used.
So Joseph, the reason why a person would possibly change the value in this field would be that maybe it's a really crowded environment and there are a lot of claims, there are a lot of executions to be claimed, and you only want to reserve your uptime for claiming really valuable transactions. You don't want to mess around and just claim a bunch of small profit transactions. And then on the other flip side, if it's not a crowded environment, you want to make this maybe not fill in the value here so that you would claim anything you can get. Is that correct?
Exactly, Sean. That is exactly it. So some people, as we know, as you probably guys know, with miners, let's say in the Ethereum network or in the Bitcoin network, the miners basically, for some of them, it's profitable to mine because they might have cheaper electricity, and for some of them, it might not be profitable to mine because they have more expensive electricity. So the same thing is here. So you have transactions that bring more profit, and you have transactions that bring less profit, so less bounties. So you might want to, as you said, you might want to reserve your time node for only like the highest of profitability time nodes, but then you might miss out on some of these lower ones. But this will depend on your personal preference. There is, in my opinion, I don't think that you would need to kind of set this to a certain value in the beginning, but like once you get further down the line, you might want to customize this and see how it kind of affects your profitability patterns.
That makes sense, and it makes sense to practice in a test environment first, so that when we do go to mainnet, you're ready to go.
Exactly. And let's cover the third option, which is also the last option we have here in this current version of the economic strategy, as the minimum balance. So what is the minimum balance? So basically, you can set your time node to only claim transactions if your balance is at least a certain amount. So what do we want to accomplish with this option? So let's say you you might run this time node on a wallet, and you might have some Ether on your wallet, but you don't really want to spend, as we mentioned before, claiming kind of like has a certain cost to it. So it has this gas cost, which later is of course refunded once you execute the transaction. All of the gas costs are refunded, but you might claim a transaction that might be a bit too far ahead, and until you execute this transaction, you're basically at like a small loss because of the gas you wasted on claiming it. So what we want to accomplish here is we want the users to have the option to only claim transactions if their balance is higher than a certain value. So for example, you might have a wallet here which has 5 ETH, and you want to say, okay, I don't want to waste money on claiming transactions if my balance is lower than 3 ETH. For example, you can say, I'm really not comfortable with having less than 3 Ether. So you can set this here. And because you might use this wallet in some other places as well, and then you might do a transfer and suddenly you find yourself with a small balance for your time node. And then you would like to kind of skip this claiming process and then only just kind of target the transactions that have not been claimed by anyone, and then you can kind of just work on these on the execution of these unclaimed transactions. So as well, I think this is a very like a specific option as well. I'm not sure if I probably wouldn't use it on my time node from the beginning. Only maybe after I've kind of accumulated some amount of Ether on it, and then I would kind of just try to kind of stop it from any losses, and just kind of like until I transfer it somewhere else or something. So this can be very useful as well. If you have any questions about this option as well, just put it in the chat box, in the question box, and we'll cover it as well at the end of the call. But first, let's get to the demo. So I've opened the TimeNode window, and what we have here is the settings tab. So if we open the settings tab, you can see that that we have these three options here. So we have the maximum deposit, so only claim transactions that require a deposit lower than, and you can put here, let's say 0.1 or whatever, 1 ETH. Only claim transactions that will get profit higher than 2 ETH, and only if my balance is higher than 3 ETH. So what happens now is we press the save button. It kind of saves these parameters. So it will ask you to input your, this is the wallet password, because it needs to restart the time node. And in order to restart the time node, on every restart and start of the time node, we kind of request a password, because we don't want to save these passwords anywhere in the browser, just to avoid any security issues. So just on every change, we'll have to request you for the password. So you will click on lock, you would see that it says changes have been saved. So if we go back to the statistics, let's try to reload the page just to see if our settings got saved. So it works also on reload. So anytime you open your time node at a later point, it will have these values set. So this currently works in the
and those are just example values. They wouldn't really be realistic values, right?
Yes, of course, these are example values. Of course, I'm not sure if any scheduled transaction will give you a profit of 2 ETH. Maybe you never know. Maybe some of them will give really high bounties, generous bounties. But of course, these are just exemplary. This will probably be more like 0.0 something 2 ETH. But yep, that's it. And let's
cool.
let's get to the Q&A then. Maybe we can cover a couple of questions from you guys.
Yes, we do have a few questions. Someone's asking if there will eventually be a dashboard that shows the number of transactions that are being claimed and that sort of thing. Do you have any details on that?
So a dashboard for claim transactions. So
Like how many transactions are being scheduled and just data about what's happening.
So we do have, if you go to our TimeNode, to our app.chronology.network, there is a thing called the transaction scanner. So if we go here back to the screen, and if we go here on the left-hand side and we press transactions, you can see two kind of like we call them transactions explorers. So we segregated them in two parts. So the first one are the scheduled transactions. These are the transactions that have not been executed yet, and the completed transactions. So if we go here to completed, you will see it will only show the last 24 hours. So we haven't been playing around with it, and you guys haven't been playing around with it either, so it doesn't show any. So, but here on the scheduled as well, you will see that some of the transactions have been scheduled. Okay, somebody has been scheduling transactions for some ridiculous years, but besides that, you can see that some of these have been scheduled. And once they are executed, they will be found in this like completed tab. But in order to avoid the overflow of these number of transactions, we have limited the completed transactions to only show the last 24 hours worth of transactions. So hopefully that answers your questions. Maybe we can get to the next one.
Yeah, someone's asking if there is a tutorial on how to set up a time node, and we do have one on blog.chronologic.network under the guides tab, and we also have it in the tutorial section of our YouTube, youtube.com/c/chronologic. So you can see the video one. It's embedded in the article, or you can just watch the video. Has all the details in the notes. So you can just get set up. It only takes a few minutes to get started.
Yep, that's it.
Someone's asking about deposits. So if someone schedules a transaction to be executed 1 week from now, does that tie up your deposit for an entire week?
Yes, it does. That is the exact reason why we would like to. That's why we added this option of the kind of limiting the maximum deposit that you would be willing to send.
Right, that makes sense. Did you lead the development on this feature, Joseph?
So yes, so I was the one implementing the features here, and yep. So if you guys have any questions, just hit me up on Telegram about it, and we can discuss it further as well. You can also find us on Gitter as well, on the Ethereum Alarm Clock Gitter, on the ChronoLogic Gitter, and this is where we prefer the development talk as well. So that's pretty cool.
Right, and any errors that people find, they can notify us there.
Yes, exactly. You can go to a GitHub page. So basically, let's say if it's about the DApp, you can go to ChronoLogic Ethereum Alarm Clock DApp, and here you can just go to the issues tab and post any issues that you might find, and then we'll get to those.
Someone from our community says, congrats on your progress. You guys have come a long way. I really appreciate all you've done. I'm a little slow, but I will be running a TimeNode. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Lo.
Very cool. Very cool to hear that. Go ahead, Joseph.
Yeah. So Mr. Swiss asks, can we play with these new settings on the Coven testnet? Yes, of course. Yes, you can play around with these. Yeah, I think we would love that as well. If you guys can just run a time node, and then you can try to schedule a couple of transactions, see how kind of with different deposits, with different things, and if you run into certain issues or something is like you're not understanding something, you can just send us just ping us on Telegram or on Gitter, and we can go through these stuff. So.
Great. Someone is asking, I don't understand how TimeNode works when using your browser. Is it using your laptop phone CPU memory to verify? So, I've used the browser with MetaMask extension, and that's how it verifies how many day tokens I have. And that's all in the tutorial that we talked about. Is there something you want to add to this, Joseph?
Yeah, so basically, if you run this on your laptop, on your phone, I mean, I would always suggest running something like this on a dedicated device. You might run this on your phone as well. It wouldn't be a problem, but it's always kind of safer to run this on a dedicated device. And it does use your laptop's CPU and memory, of course, as any browser tab window. Um, but it will not use a lot because it doesn't do any. It's not like mining that it does any serious computation like proof of work. So it basically just competes with other time nodes for transactions, and this claiming mechanism is what stops, what kind of helps us avoid the need of using certain proof of work or something for rewards.
Right. Someone is asking about the security audit. If you check our Telegram community within the last 2 days, you can see a public link for the progress on the audit. So that's the best way to find out how close we are.
Yep. So next level asks, are the settings or and conditions? Okay. So basically the settings are all, of course, and conditions. So if a certain transaction has a deposit that is higher than what you are willing to give, so let's say the top limit for you is 0.1 ether, but the profit might be high enough, it might be higher than 2 ETH or something, it will still not claim this transaction because it is the deposit is still too low. So basically, all of these have to be valid in order to claim a certain transaction.
Great. The community was really active today. I can tell people are really excited to start earning those bounties.
Thanks, guys, for the awesome questions. So let's see if we have maybe like another one. I think we covered most of it. So
great, Joseph. Well, great job with this feature, and I'm sure that there will be additional development ongoing. So that's why we keep doing these live streams, so we can let you guys know first.
exactly. Thanks, Sean, for starting the call, introducing us, and thanks for the awesome questions as well, and for managing our wonderful community as well. So that's it.
Great, guys. Have a good day. Thanks for tuning in. Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in, guys. Cheers.